The movie begins with Seth, a solitary and timid man who works at an animal control center in Los Angeles. His life is uneventful and repetitive. He spends most of his time either cleaning up cages, feeding the dogs, or doing menial office work. The shelter itself is dull and shadowy, with an eerie quiet that mirrors Seth's own existence. There's no indication of any personal life, hobbies, or meaningful relationships. He rarely speaks to others and seems to drift through his day unnoticed and uninvolved. One afternoon on his bus ride home, Seth spots Holly, a young, vibrant woman who radiates confidence and beauty. She's reading a book and not paying attention to her surroundings, but something about her strikes Seth immediately. A flicker of recognition crosses his face. It turns out they went to high school together, though she likely doesn't remember him. From this moment, Seth becomes fixated. After that brief sighting, he searches for Holly online. He quickly finds her Facebook profile, scrolling through her pictures, posts, and comments late at night. He notes everything: where she works, who she's friends with, and even what time she seems to be active. It's not just curiosity anymore, it's an obsession growing by the minute. Soon, Seth makes a decision. He goes to the diner where Holly works as a waitress. When she finally comes to take his order, he nervously tries to spark a conversation. He reminds her that they went to school together, and though Holly tries to be polite, she clearly doesn't remember him. The interaction is awkward. Seth fumbles with his words and struggles to keep her attention. She smiles politely and quickly walks away. A few minutes later, Seth finally works up the nerve to ask her out. But Holly hesitates, sensing something off about him, and gently turns him down. Seth is visibly hurt but masks it behind a forced smile. After being rejected by Holly, Seth's obsession reaches a disturbing turning point. He no longer tries to get her attention through casual encounters or awkward conversations. Instead, he starts watching her from a distance, following her through the city unnoticed. The next morning, Holly returns to work, trying to shake off the strange tension from the night before. Her coworker greets her and excitedly informs her that she received a bouquet of flowers from a secret admirer, placed mysteriously in the staff room. Holly is confused but intrigued. When she walks in, she finds a bouquet of roses, delicately arranged in a vase, her absolute favorite. Her initial surprise fades into something more personal. The fact that someone knows her exact favorite flower feels intimate, and immediately her mind jumps to her ex-boyfriend Eric. Later that evening, driven by curiosity and perhaps a flicker of hope, Holly walks into the bar where Eric works. She smiles and thanks him for the thoughtful flowers. But Eric is clearly puzzled and says he didn't send anything. Holly's expression shifts from hopeful to embarrassed. Realizing that it wasn't him, she quickly laughs it off, trying not to make things awkward. She excuses herself and steps outside to get some air and smoke a cigarette. What she doesn't realize is that Seth is nearby, watching. He steps out and tries to engage her in a casual conversation, as if nothing had happened before. His presence is off-putting, his demeanor odd and uninvited. Holly's smile disappears. She now clearly recognizes Seth, the man who stared at her from the bus, who awkwardly asked her out, and who's now showing up everywhere. Everything clicks in that moment. Horrified, she storms back into the bar and tells Eric. Eric doesn't hesitate. He punches him in the face and throws him to the ground. Later that night, in his apartment, Seth sits in eerie silence, gently thumbing through the notebook he stole from Holly. It's her personal journal. Page after page is filled with entries, private thoughts, heartbreaks, and detailed fragments of her emotional life. The more he reads, the more convinced he becomes that he is the only one who understands her. That everyone else in her life has failed her. The next morning, Seth returns to his job at the animal shelter. While performing his usual cleaning duties, he sneaks off to explore the far side of the shelter, a door that's usually kept locked, part of the old, unused wing. He manages to pick the lock and finds a staircase leading down into a dark basement. The place hasn't been touched in years. It's cold, quiet, forgotten, a perfect hiding place. As Seth walks through the abandoned rooms, he realizes he's found something useful. A blank canvas. In one of the old rooms, he stares at the wall for a long time, almost meditative. Then something clicks. This is where it will happen, this is where she will be safe. Over the next several nights, Seth begins collecting materials. He brings in chains, steel rods, tools, locks. He constructs a large, welded cage in the center of the basement, solid, immovable. The walls are soundproof. No one would hear a scream down here. From the shelter's medical storage, he also steals dog sedatives. He plans to use them on Holly. This isn't about hurting her. Not in his mind. One evening, after Holly finishes her shift and heads home, Seth follows. He waits until her apartment is still. Then he breaks in. Holly, tired and unaware, gets inside and calls on her roommate, but no one answers. She goes to bed unaware that Seth is already in the apartment. As the room darkens and her eyes begin to close, Seth attacks. He jumps on top of her and injects her with the sedative. Her limbs weaken, her vision blurs, her voice falters. Hours later, Holly wakes up groggy, disoriented, and terrified. She's in a cage. A literal cage. The room is bare, concrete, with only dim lighting from a single bulb overhead. She immediately grabs the bars and tries to shake them loose, but they don't budge. Her screams echo into silence. No one is coming. Meanwhile, Seth returns home. Calm. As if nothing happened. The next morning, he arrives at work early and heads straight to the basement. He brings down food and water. Holly glares at him, terrified and furious, but Seth doesn't respond emotionally. He simply places the food and tells her that this is what must happen. He believes he's saving her. Over the next few days, a twisted routine develops. Seth performs his regular duties upstairs, cleaning cages, feeding animals, while returning every few hours to check on Holly. Sometimes she's curled up on the floor, cold and still. Sometimes she screams. Other times, she simply stares at him with blank hatred. One day, Seth finally speaks more clearly. He tells her that the cage is not a prison, it's a safe place. He explains that she needs to be cleansed from the world. That love isn't what people think it is. That real love means control. He insists that he knows her, and that they are meant to be together. Holly listens in silence. She doesn't scream. She doesn't cry. She studies him. She begins to understand something that changes everything. Seth is broken, mentally unwell, and consumed by obsession. But more importantly, she realizes that in order to survive, she needs to play along. The next day, Seth returns to the hidden basement beneath the animal shelter, carrying Holly's notepad. This time, his demeanor is more intense, more curious than controlling. He sits beside her cage and tells Holly he's been studying her notes. He says he first found it odd that she wrote in the third person, like she was observing someone else, detaching herself from her thoughts. But then, as he continued reading, disturbing truths began to emerge. Seth carefully confronts her with what he's pieced together. He claims that the roommate Holly has mentioned doesn't exist, that she's been living alone the entire time. Holly is instantly defensive, accusing him of trying to play mind games, but Seth is calm, methodical. He reads a specific passage from her journal, a memory, one she's convinced is real. In it, Holly recalls an argument with her roommate while driving home. She had accused the roommate of sleeping with her ex, Eric. Though the roommate apologized, Holly, consumed with jealousy and rage, veered the car into oncoming traffic, resulting in her roommate's death. For a moment, Holly still refuses to accept it. But then, as she looks around her cage, she sees a vision of her roommate, haunting, silent, staring back. The realization begins to sink in. Maybe the roommate never made it out of that car. The following days, Seth becomes consumed by Holly's writing, disturbed yet fascinated by how her mind works. He never expected her to carry trauma so deep, in many ways, mirroring his own instability. At work, his performance declines further. His manager calls him into her office, furious that he's falling behind on kennel maintenance and supply tracking. She tells him it's his final warning. One more mistake, and he's gone. The next day, trying to avoid confrontation, Seth keeps to himself, ignoring his friendly coworker Nate. He goes straight to Holly and gives her chocolates to help keep her strength up. As he leaves, Nate watches from a distance, suspicious. Nate, curious and concerned about Seth's recent behavior, sneaks into the restricted basement area. There, he discovers Holly, malnourished, locked in a cage, her eyes wide with a strange mix of fear and calculation. Shocked, Nate rushes to unlock her, but before he can act, Seth storms in. Without hesitation, Seth stabs him, over and over, until Nate lies lifeless on the concrete floor. Something dark and unexpected happens next. Holly calmly tells Seth to dispose of the body. She instructs him to burn it, remove the evidence, but also to be smart about it. Seth, confused and dazed, obeys. He hacks apart Nate's body and feeds the remains to the shelter dogs, while Holly watches with cold, quiet approval. A few days later, Seth returns to the basement to clean up the blood. Holly sits in silence at first, but then speaks. She tells Seth that he'll be fine, that she remembers her first kill. She tells him that once you cross the line, it changes something inside you. It becomes addictive. Her tone isn't emotional, it's factual, almost comforting. Seth doesn't respond. He finishes scrubbing the walls and silently walks away. The next day, a detective shows up at the shelter and interviews Seth about Nate's disappearance. Seth lies, saying that Nate simply stormed out during an argument and never returned. But the detective isn't convinced. He lingers, watching Seth and reading him. Later, Seth sees the detective combing through surveillance footage. Panic builds. He hurries back to Holly, realizing he's in over his head. Maybe if he releases her now, he can still make things right. He fumbles with the cage lock. Holly steps out, slowly. She thanks him and she kisses him. Suddenly, she slits his throat. Weeks pass, Holly is back with Eric. Life seems normal again, but it's only a facade. When Eric receives a message from another girl, Holly sees it. Her smile fades, but she keeps her rage buried and hands him the phone calmly. Later, Holly leaves her apartment and walks across the city to a forgotten storage facility. There, sits a familiar cage. Inside it is Seth, wounded, weak, barely alive, but breathing. Now it's Holly who's in control. And she plans to torture Seth some more. Make sure to like and subscribe for more notifications. Until next time. See you soon.